As a practicing introvert, it can sometimes be really hard for me to articulate my strengths or even realize that I should articulate my strengths. And this can be particularly problematic if I'm trying to work with extroverts. So today I thought I'd create a video just for you extroverts. And hopefully I can achieve two things with this video. One, maybe you have an introvert in your life that has trouble articulating these things too. And two, I want to help you understand some strengths that introverts in your life might have so that you can leverage them to your advantage. Alright, before I get to the main content, I want to mention that this video is part of a 3-part series. This video that you're watching now is aimed specifically at extroverts and helping them understand introvert strengths. If you want to access the other videos in the playlist, make sure you click up here on the card. Also, if you've gotten here early in the video's life cycle and I haven't yet uploaded the other videos, make sure you click on the subscribe button and tickle that little notification bell to make sure that you are notified of my future videos. Alright, now let's dive in. I want to share some thoughts about strengths that introverts in your life are likely to have. And again, these are generalizations, but if you think about the introverts in your life that you care about or that you work closely with, maybe some of what I say here will resonate. So the first superpower I want to mention here is that introverts are usually very empathetic. Now, I don't mean sympathetic here, I mean empathetic. They're often able to deeply understand another person through intuition, and this leads to a variety of awesome traits. They're usually really great listeners. If you give them a chance to observe without having to participate, it's highly likely that they'll notice a million different things that totally blew right by you. Not only about situations, but about people and people's tendencies. And it's often easier for them to relate to someone even if they've never been through that experience, just because introverts are usually very sensitive to other people's energy. And for this reason, and I know this is true for me personally, I tend to have very few close friends, but I invest in those relationships deeply. And when you combine an introvert's preference for deep relationships with their capacity for empathy, you'll probably find that introverts are some of the closest people to you in your life, and that you trust them deeply with who you really are. Think of the people you're close to in your life. If you have a friend or a loved one that you tell your deepest, darkest secrets to, who seems to know you better than you know yourself, that person's probably an introvert. Introverts are usually better at taking more calculated risks and having better outcomes because they're less prone to flights of fancy or whimsy and tend to process a lot before they make a decision. This tendency to think deeply about things affects a lot of other things too. They're a lot more likely to be really prepared. They're a lot more likely to think before they speak. And getting back to the empathy piece, taking how the other person is going to receive the information into account before they speak. You may find that when an introvert does speak up, their ideas seem to be better than other people's. And I don't mean that condescendingly. I mean more fleshed out, more considerate of ramifications, and likely having a variety of different outcomes based on different decision points. And even though introverts tend to get a stereotype of being very fragile, this ability to dive deep and really think things through actually makes them really resilient. You might find that when an introvert is put into a position of power, which they often might kick and scream about while they're being dragged into a position of power. But once they're there, you'll probably find that they're actually really good at it because they're more likely to take a variety of opinions into account. They're more likely to let people run with their ideas. They're less likely to feel the need to put their stamp on everything. And ironically, because they're usually reluctant to lead, people tend to trust them more when they do lead because they don't see it as a power grab. Now again, I'm making generalizations here. Each person is highly nuanced. I'm just trying to give you some ideas for strengths to look for in introvert people that you know, so that you can not only celebrate them, but that you can leverage them to balance out areas where you might be weak. One really powerful side effect of this tendency for an introvert to withdraw, gather his or her thoughts, think through things more deeply, is that they're less prone to groupthink. In fact, when they're younger, people might have labeled them as rebellious, but it's less about rebellion and more about thinking for oneself. And when they are going through the thought process, because they're getting less outside stimulation or input, the ideas or solutions they arrive at are usually less influenced by the opinions of the group. Now, as humans, we're all susceptible to groupthink, and there's a ton of really interesting research out there about bias and how it's just kind of part of our human condition. But I'm merely trying to articulate that introverts seem to be less affected by this. Not that they're not affected at all, but just less affected. So if you want a person that's going to tell you how it really is, look for an introvert. Well, that's it for me today, guys. But before you go anywhere, make sure you check out the other videos in this playlist by clicking right up here. You know you want to. I need you to be quiet just for 5 minutes. Maybe a little bit longer than that. Talking to my cat.